We're going to have a couple of series around problem solving mistaken behaviors, and there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to talk fast, move quick, and here we are in part one. So one of the things we want to think about is making sure that we have positive consistency. So we need to make sure that our interactions with children are friendly and consistent. But consistent does not mean rigid. Consistent does not mean that you enforce the same thing every time. It means that your approach is consistent so children know what to expect from you. We also want to make sure that we are always in a problem solving point of view, which frees us from the burden of punishment and helps children see us as allies. Witness is a really important characteristic in adult caregivers, and it really allows for some of the most effective teaching. And it is a demonstration of the ability to stand back and see the whole situation, reserve judgment, don't do those snap judgments, but get all the facts in place, identify problem solving strategies, and employ flexible responses. I like to think of this as your spidey senses. Your spidey senses don't make you jump in and say, I know exactly what's going on here. But they make you go, something's happening. I need to find out more. So with it, this is really important in using that problem solving approach and avoiding jumping in where there is just a little bit of information, but instead gathering all information. So if you see a child smack another child in the block area, as opposed to jumping in and stating that that's not okay and breaking it up, coming in and saying, whoa, I just saw this, tell me more, because there could be a precursor to that behavior. So now we're going to talk a little bit about when to intervene. Related to marginal mistaken behaviors, these are the small level 1, level 2 mistaken behaviors, you want to ask yourself, who is bothered by the behavior and why? And will my intervention be more disruptive than the behavior? Sometimes we get really bothered by the behavior and it creates a bigger issue. So when I was a young teacher, I got really bothered by children who were tipping back in their chairs at meal times, and I was constantly on children for that, which meant that it increased, and it was happening more and more. I had a great director who really challenged me to think about that, and even more so challenged me to stop focusing on that. And an interesting thing happened when I did that. When I stopped focusing on it, the tipping of the chairs became no big deal. It didn't really happen anymore because it wasn't getting any attention. And I wasn't creating more disruption. I was creating more disruption in the classroom by constantly focusing on this. Now, granted, the chair could have slipped and child could have hurt themselves, but that's the question of, is the intervention more disruptive than the behavior? If the chair slips and the child, bumps their butt on the floor, it's going to be a little owie, but it's not a life-threatening situation. And likely that child will then become the peer patrol person every time thereafter, if that does happen, saving me from creating a large disruption in the classroom. So the other thing we want to talk about here is bossy behaviors. And I want to really caution you to avoid labeling young children as bullies. Bullies in early childhood are very, very rare. I do have one story that I tell in this course about working with a child who had some bullying type behavior, but it's really much more rare than we give credit to. We tend to overuse the term of bullying. But if there is instrumental aggression, if a child is hurting or manipulating other children in order to gain power, that is bullying, and we obviously need to intervene there. But if that's not happening, then we want to ask ourselves, is the child learning to become a leader? And what is the effect on other children? In free play situations, children naturally emerge as leaders and followers, and some children fall into a little bit of both, and or secondary leaders, and there's a whole world of study around the dynamics of play. We want to give children the space to experiment with leadership and learn what it's like to be leaders and learn their leadership skills, and also what it's like to follow leaders. Because many times children who follow child leaders learn leadership skills themselves. Now I want to talk a little bit about arguments. We want to watch arguments carefully and ask, is someone getting hurt or about to get hurt? And can I trust that the children can negotiate this themselves? Whenever children can negotiate themselves, we should let them do that. And we should know the children whose switches get flipped really quickly and make sure we're close by and intervening before that can happen. But I think too often we worry that it's going to lead to someone getting hurt when really the children are likely to be in control and not let it get to that point. Now we want to talk a little bit about choices. There are three levels of choices. The first one is inviting choices, and that's a prevention level. And there's not really an issue, but we want to get ahead of something. So there's a really messy block area. We say, gosh, look at all these toys on the floor. And we really need some help to pick them up. Maybe it's Miller's choice time. There's still 30 minutes left. It doesn't have to be pristine and perfect, but eventually that area has to get clean. So you invite some kids to help you out now. Now let's imagine that that didn't happen. And now, gosh, it's 10 minutes before outside time. And then we know that we have to clean up the block area because we're going to go outside and then we're going to come in and have lunch and it's time to get ready for nap. And whew, that's a crazy busy time. So then we go to that next problem solving level and we get a little more serious and say, gosh, guys, we got to go outside soon. But we might need some of our outside time cleaning up. Maybe we could really hurry and finish cleaning up these blocks so we can go outside. My tone is a little more serious, and I'm making it clear that I'd love your help so we can go outside, but I'm not requiring it. The commanding choice is when you're getting closer to a crisis. So this is where, it's just starting to get hurt in the block area, guys. We can either talk together through this issue or we can choose to spread out in other centers. Right? So I'm not judging it. I'm giving two viable choices. And I'm using a serious tone. I'm still friendly, but I'm firm. Like, oh, kids are getting hurt. I can't let that happen. So we can do one of two things. We can work together or we can spread out. When giving choices, there are some important considerations that you need to remember. The first one is an in choice. That is the ideal choice and one that the adult hopes the child will make. The out choice is a second option that maybe is not as ideal, but you can live with it. If we discuss number 3, commanding choices, the in choice is working together on this issue. The out choice is spreading out into other centers. Now, first and foremost, I want to use this as a teaching opportunity. So I want to talk together with the kids about the issue, but maybe they're not ready to do that, and maybe they just need some time away from each other to cool down. I can live with that they want to choose to spread to other centers, and maybe we can talk about it later. And you know what? Maybe we won't, because sometimes just letting it go is okay too. So those are our in and out choices. Here are my words of caution. Number 1, do not give a choice that you are not okay with a child choosing. 2, do not give a choice that is undesirable to the child. And 3, don't give a choice that's not a choice. All of these are manipulation, not choices. And I know manipulative is a strong word, that is manipulation of the child. You can say, you have to eat your broccoli or you can go to bed early. You know that the going to bed early is not desirable to a child, right? And maybe you could say instead, if you don't want your broccoli right now because you're full, that's okay. You could eat it before you go to bed tonight, or you can eat it for breakfast tomorrow. You get to pick. That's a real choice. Um, and the last piece here is the use of okay. So saying to a child, I need you to clean up in the block area, okay? And they say, no, I'm good, and they move on. That's not really okay, right? You really need them to work with you in the block area. So if it's not really tricky, says, gosh, I really need your help to clean up with me in the block area. Would you like to do it now, or would you like to do it in 2 minutes? I can set a timer if you'd rather wait. That's a real choice. But when I say okay, because I'm trying to be nice, I'm accidentally setting up a choice that isn't really a choice. So now we're going to play a little game. You're going to tell me if these scenarios are true choices or not. So the first thing is, you can sit and eat your vegetables or go to bed now. Now, I know you all know this one because we just talked about it. That's right, it is not a true choice. And for all those reasons that we just talked about. So here's another one. You can clean up the spill now or lose TV for the rest of the day. What do you think this is? That's right, it is not a true choice. That is a threat. You can clean up this spill now, or you can help me clean it up in a few minutes. That's a real choice. Or once we get this cleaned up, you can watch TV. That's a real choice. So this child has a choice of time to decide when they're going to do it. Or you can clean this spill up by yourself, or I can help you. Those are all true choices. Okay. You can use the blocks for building, or you can choose another center to play in. You got it. That is a true choice. If those blocks are being thrown across the room, that's not safe for others. So the child can use them to build or they can move on. If you need to make that sound, you can do that outside of circle time. That is a true choice. You guys got it. And this is a really interesting situation. I have found this a lot. When I try to manage behavior in a group setting, a large group setting, I would tend to get more disruptive behavior. But if I dismissed the child and said, hey, you can do that, like just if you don't want to be here, just go somewhere else, go do something else. Oftentimes they would go do something else for like 30 seconds and then they would like wander back over. Because it turns out it's really more fun to be in an interactive group time than it is to be causing a stir. So that is the end of part one of our screen cast. You are now ready to move on to part